It is really, truly my biggest honor here to welcome a dear friend and colleague, an absolute mover and shaker on this planet, here fighting the good fight for, I'm going to say, all 8 billion people on Earth. So, Colette is an award-winning lawyer and climate justice organizer. She's a trusted voice in the climate justice and Black liberation movements, and her work focuses on beautifully creating spaces for frontline communities to gather and advance climate strategies that help us steward the water, energy, and land. A generational native of Bayou Liberty, Louisiana, she is a 2019 Obama Fellow and is the recipient of many prestigious awards, including the 2023 Heinz Award for the Environment, the 2022 Catalyst Award from Rachel's Network, and the 2022 William O. Douglas Award. She has taught me so much over the years, has been with us at the ISCM since I think 2023, and this is our first time shifting her over to the keynote because I couldn't think of a better person to kick off the school for us this year. So Colette, really thank you so much for joining us, and over to you.
Ashe. Thank you, sister. Wow, what a beautiful opening between you and Hussein. I have nothing else to add. Class dismissed. It has all been said, friends. It has all been said. But if you stick around, I'll just reiterate really everything that has been said. And Lauren, what a beautiful, beautiful opening just to listen to. I had to sit back and just listen to that. That was really wonderful. Peace, everyone. My name is Colette Pichon Battle. I use she, her pronouns. I'm calling in today from the traditional lands of the Choctaw Nation in what is now the United States of America. Southeast Louisiana is what they call this place. And like Lauren, we like to open up with a land acknowledgement of the original peoples of this place. One part of my bloodline is Choctaw, and I'm on my grandmother's land right now. And I'm looking out at a magnolia tree with a lot of blooms. It's raining here. It's a beautiful day, a beautiful spring day in South Louisiana, nice and hot, the way we like it. And this is the place I call home. I also just want to take a moment of gratitude to say thank you to the International School on Climate Mobilities, the Beyond Climate Collaborative, and the Othering and Belonging Institute at UC Berkeley. In the United States, we always like to take a moment to make fun of California. And let me just say, that's just something we do here. But I'll just say the Californians are taking off today, but the Louisianans showed up for the school. Y'all make sure y'all let them know that. The joke about California was officially made today. It's a holiday here in the US, but this is an invitation I never turn down. You are part of what I've been able to see over the years, a beautiful group of people who are really committed to doing something. And as I continue to do my work, there's nothing that gives me more hope than seeing these classes full of folks, hearing the questions, seeing people who actually care and learning about what's going on where you are. I do want to apologize. I am an American, so sorry to everybody for everything right now. That's the first part. But the second part is I speak with a Southern accent sometimes, and so I hope you can understand me. Um, and also, my story is very US based, so I recognize that some of what I say will be very clearly US and not necessarily global. But this work in the US has taken me to the next level of understanding migration globally. So with that, I'll just start off by saying some of you look very young. I won't talk about it. I won't make any jokes about your generation, although I will after I get off the call. But mostly, I have a lot of hope in these next and you upcoming generations. But I want to say that I got started in 2005. Lord have mercy. How many of you were even moving around at that point? But in 2005, there was a large hurricane in the US Gulf and the Gulf of Mexico. And it was called Hurricane Katrina. 2005 was actually one of the most active hurricane seasons on record. And Hurricane Katrina, still stands in the US as the most costly disaster that the US has faced. So it was a long time ago now, but it is sort of a starting point of the climate conversation in the US. Unlike the rest of the world, the US, being as privileged as it is, didn't have to really think about, oh, hello, self. Okay. Didn't have to think about or really talk through climate. It happened over there, it happened to other people, it didn't really happen to us. And so that was really our starting point. Hurricane Katrina shifted that for many of us, and it shifted it for me. I don't know if there are any lawyers here. I can't see you anymore, but if you're there, let me see if I can change my screen. Okay, great. If you're any lawyers, let me see. I don't know if you want to identify yourself, although be careful, this is being recorded. But if there are any lawyers in the house, let me see you give me an emoji. Um, and for those of us who are lawyers, listen, we're like a terrible profession and also very needed. Okay, they'll like us at some point, not at every point, but at some point we can be very helpful, especially around strategy and especially around defending people in current legal systems. But I was a corporate lawyer before Katrina and doing what we're told to do in America, which is go make some money, and that equals success, right? And then Hurricane Katrina came and it destroyed my community. I'm in South Louisiana, and Hurricane Katrina pretty much wiped out Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama. These are three states right next to each other on the coast down on the Gulf of Mexico, at least the southern parts of those states. And so my work began coming home and doing disaster recovery. But I was working in corporate law and I was working in corporate immigration law. So I had this random knowledge about the movement of people across borders, usually for business and commerce and finance. But this was a moment where I got to go home during after a climate disaster and really think about the movement of people in the aftermath of disaster. What I saw shocked me. It probably doesn't shock any of you, but I saw a massive failure of government programs and policy. I saw massive movements of people in and out of the space, those who were displaced, those who were brought in to clean up from South America, Central America. And I saw really a different understanding of human rights and rights of people as they move across different borders. Because I was working on immigration in a particular way before I came home, I understood the laws and the courtrooms that we would be in order to get people who were not from the US protection in the US. What I did not understand was how to get protection for those people who were from the US but were displaced to nearby states like Texas or Tennessee or Georgia, no longer in Louisiana, but in an internal displacement inside of their own country, but in a different state, in a different place. So this really began my starting point around understanding migration as opposed to immigration, as opposed to refugee rights and human rights, as opposed to land rights and who has a right to be where. This is the starting point of Taproot Earth, the organization of which I am now one of the partners with my partner, Anthony Giancaterino. And our work at Taproot Earth is focused on advancing climate justice. We are headquartered in the US South, which is a little unusual in the US. There's lots of jokes people make about the South, which is why I have to make jokes about California, but they make jokes about the South too. One thing to understand about the US South, it has the largest population of Black folks. So this is where you can still see, I believe something like 40% of the Black population is still in the US South. And so, and I don't know if any of you know about the history of the US, but we have a history of slavery and colonial extraction from the African continent. And they didn't bring the enslaved Africans everywhere. They brought them to the US South because of agriculture. This is where a big agricultural practice happened in the US South and in the Caribbean. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. But Taproot Earth is a climate justice organization, and we are going to achieve climate justice through two things, we're sure: Black liberation and Indigenous sovereignty. Now, this sets us apart from every other climate organization pretty much in the US, certainly around many places of the planet, because most people begin the climate work with an understanding of a reduction of greenhouse gases, which is absolutely part of the conversation. But we have a different understanding, which is a root cause understanding. If you want to get to the root of the climate crisis, you must understand and advance Black liberation and Indigenous sovereignty. We believe we can advance Black liberation and Indigenous sovereignty through climate reparations. There's a lot going on now. I'm sure you'll talk about it over the next several weeks. Recent decisions from very high up in global court spaces saying that reparations have to be a part of this climate action. And for Taproot Earth, there are two elements that we work on: climate finance and climate migration. We believe these are the keys to advancing climate reparations, and we can talk a little bit more about finance another time. Today, let's talk about climate migration. I'll go back to a broader context in a second, but let me say at Taproot Earth, we say everyone has the human right to remain, the human right to migrate, and the human right to return. The human right to remain, the human right to migrate, and the human right to return. Now, if you hear these words, they should some ears should be perking up, because when you say you have a right to remain, that means some of us, and I live in a place in South Louisiana that will be taken by the sea no matter what we do. So the land that I live on will be lost to sea level rise. There's nothing scientifically that we can do about it. And so I live in a very precarious sort of daily fight, right? I know my land is going to go. And I know this fight has to be fought. So shout out to those coming in from the Pacific and those coming in from Bangladesh. South Louisiana is losing land at one of the fastest rates on the planet, and we are brothers and sisters with those folks who are losing their land. But people have a right to remain. And in my community, one of the tribes here told me they were not going to leave, no matter if the land was gone, and I remember wanting to challenge, like, we must leave, we must go, we must survive. But the truth is, self-determination has got to be a part of this conversation. And if someone chooses to stay, even if you disagree, it's the self-determination that we have to fight for. It's the self-determination that we have to protect, especially when it comes to Indigenous and First Nations on their land and on their territory, even if that land is going away. The other phrase that should stick out to you is the right to return. This is the very first time I said this was 5 years after Katrina. A couple of students from Palestine were in Louisiana and they were there for a commemoration. And we said, we want the right to return home. They had kept people out of Louisiana for years, not allowing them to come back to their home after Katrina hit. And some young Palestinian activists said, we believe in the right to return as well. Are you with us? And we said, yes, we are. And so all of a sudden, our right to return to our homes in Louisiana after a disaster were parallel to calls of people wanting their right to return to their homes all over the place. And we realized that this conversation around climate cannot continue to be seen as a single issue, because it is not. So let me say this, write this one down. Don't forget it, because everybody is wrong. Colette is right. Everyone else is wrong. Climate is not an issue. It's not like housing, it's not like health, it's not like food, it's not like environmental justice. Climate is the context that we are working in. Climate is the context. Climate change is the context we're working in. There's another context we're working in too, sadly, and that's the rise of authoritarianism globally. And so now the question becomes, how do we ensure housing and food and education and rights? How do we ensure those things in shifting contexts? And the context of climate change and the context of rising authoritarianism is where y'all have landed yourself and I've landed myself, and we've got to figure this out. If we're going to talk about climate migration, we absolutely have to talk about disaster recovery. Some of you come from communities that have already experienced disaster. I know I wouldn't be in this without Hurricane Katrina destroying my community. I wouldn't have even been paying attention, not really. I'm in a very privileged place. I'm in a privileged country. I had an education and I could choose what I wanted to do. But my community got destroyed. And I mean destroyed. I don't mean um, inconvenienced. I mean, we were destroyed. Nothing was left in a lot of places. And so to talk about disaster response, to talk about disaster recovery, is to understand that people were displaced by disaster. And in that disaster cleanup, people were brought in. Immigrants were brought in from Peru, Honduras, Guatemala, Brazil. They were brought into the US on what they call blanket L visas, which means you could bring in a lot of people at one time. And when those workers demanded their paychecks, they were fired. And the US law said if you don't have a job, you lose your legal status. So they brought people in legally, made them work, didn't pay them, fired them, and then made them all illegal. Now, we've got to fix that kind of system that allows for that type of exploitative work. But also, we have to understand people were brought in while others were kept out. African Americans, in particular, African American men who were coming home to look for work, were told they couldn't come back home. They were criminalized, they were racially profiled, they were stopped, they were jailed, and they weren't allowed to come and get some of the jobs. This set up deep tension between the Latinos slash South American population and the African Americans who were trying to come home. This was a socially engineered tension that didn't exist before. And these are the kinds of things you've got to watch out for in disaster. We're not just talking about replacing buildings. We're talking about when people move in and move out and move in and move out. We're talking about social systems that have got to work better than they work right now. That othering that Hussein talked about is a real piece of this. We've also got to talk about the difference between justice and charity in climate disaster, because charity has gotten us into a bad situation. And I'm talking to all of the Christians out there, including myself. We've been told the wrong thing. They totally lied to us. Charity is not what we should be advancing. At all times, we must be advancing justice with a charitable approach, perhaps, but justice at the foundation. And to see people as those who need your help as opposed to understanding a system that created the disaster in the first place, is to miss the point of the sacrifice of that disaster. Charity will get us not very far. Justice is what we have to advance. And if we're going to talk about justice, and yes, I'm a lawyer, we're going to talk about rights. And we've got to talk about rights and laws because those things play a role here. Our society must be governed by some agreement of what we're all going to do. And the role of law is necessary, but also necessarily responsive only, meaning the laws change when someone feels a violation of the law and then you change the law. Like we very rarely envision law for something that's coming. We are usually making law to respond to something that has happened. And so for the lawyers and the policymakers and some of the words that Lauren said today, like it's time to envision something much broader than we've ever had to before. Not because climate is an issue, but because climate change is a context that none of us are going to get out of. And there is a global shift happening, and all of our laws, my laws, your laws, in all of the countries that you're in, are not ready. They are absolutely not ready for the future that we are walking into. We've got to understand that justice, seeking justice, our judicial systems, and a foundation of an understanding of human rights have to be what helps us vision a better way forward. And I want to say when we talk about laws and we talk about policy and who has rights, now we're getting into something very spicy called identity. And boy, does this get complicated. The only place where I've seen race more complicated than the US is in the Caribbean. And the only place more complicated than the Caribbean was South America. And watching 17 different categories of Blackness in Brazil, and watching different categories of Blackness in Louisiana, where I come from, and understanding that most of this was created by a colonizing power that extracted us from Africa and brought us in as laborers into the Caribbean, into South America, into the US South, with no intention of ever us coming out of this thing called chattel slavery. No, despite the Republicans in the US, we were not servants. Our humanity was taken away legally. There was a time in this planet where the word slave or servant was not synonymous. I'm not talking about a biblical servitude. I'm talking about chattel slavery. There's a distinction here because if there was ever a time where a human's humanity was extracted from them, this was it. And we're facing that moment again now. If you're not paying attention to what's going on around the planet, it is time to wake up. We're at that moment where we're about to start taking people's humanity away from them. And that took hundreds of years to break. And that destroyed hundreds of ecosystems and lives and families and people. I'm proud to be one of the folks, proud to be of the bloodline of one of the families that survived it. But so many people did not. And we are on the brink of that now globally. And the situation is even worse because that context of slavery and the transatlantic slave trade was not during a climactic shift, which is what we're in right now. I think I just have a few minutes left, so let me say two more things, and this should just really get you pumped up because Hussein said it. This is about land, and not land as like land, not the dirt. No, the people on that land. This is about sovereignty. And now we're getting to the thing that the colonial powers in existence today, and the historical ones too, don't want to hear. Whose land is it? Who has a right to be there? What reparation is owed? And how is this going to work? Now, this gets complicated because I'm a Black American in the United States. Some would say Black Americans aren't indigenous to the United States. Black folks aren't indigenous to the Caribbean or South America. And that could be argued, that could be true, but the problem is we are now facing each other in some tensions around sovereignty and identity and indigeneity. This is not an easy question. This won't even be an easy solution. But we've got to know we're going to get into some hard conversations and they're going to be pretty sad and they're going to be pretty folks are going to get angry, and this is the work that we're going to have to work through. But we have to understand sovereignty as connected to identity. We have to understand land as connected to identity, and therefore we have to understand the nature of the nation state. And this is where we've got to push, because the truth is, while your money can easily go across any border, your internet-based information can cross any border. Somehow people cannot. And this should make us question the borders, not the people. The political borders that were drawn on the back of a napkin that divided up Africa, the borders that came into existence out of nowhere and now made the United States, the borders that now keep many of us from liking, talking to, or listening to each other because they play a role in division. A border is not a boundary. A border is this invisible, made up political line used to maintain power. A boundary, like a mountain or a river or a sea, very natural thing. Very natural thing that one group can never claim. But a political line, that seems to be the problem that we're dealing with now. The state of our nation states vary. I was listening to, I know America, we just a hot mess right now. I mean, hot mess. I have no excuse. I got nothing. I got nothing. Hot mess equals America right now. But I've been looking at some other countries too. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. We're not the only hot mess out there. We're not the only ones with these conservatives saying things like climate change doesn't exist. We're not the only ones out there saying those people don't belong here. We're not the only ones out there saying you can't cross that line. This is our line. Yes, we are the poster child for ridiculousness at this moment, but take a look at your countries. Take a look at your countries because ours isn't the only one. This authoritarianism is rising up everywhere and they're taking it out on the people who have to move across the lines, across the political lines that were made up. And they're having to move through no reason of their own. That Niger Delta quote, they didn't pollute that water. That's oil companies. When are we going to go after them? When do they have to be accountable? This is what we're up against. And if we're going to talk about our nation states and the state of our nation states, then that means we're going to have to question and understand the values of the countries that we are in. Why does your country exist? What is the goal and the purpose of it? Now, look, mine exists to dominate. I got it. I understand. America exists to dominate. And so my role has to be helping to balance out and to come up with a new raison d'etre, a new reason of being in this world. We cannot dominate. Perhaps we can exist to liberate. Perhaps we can exist to create and to grow. And so that has got to be the work. This isn't just going to be about changing one policy at a time or one law at a time or helping one person at a time. We are in a moment right now where the world is about to change. And we need every single one of you helping to make sure that that change happens. And when we do it, we have to do it knowing that everybody's about to have to move across all kinds of lines. You will have to move. In fact, you have the right to. And that is where we have to start these conversations from. We have a right to remain in our sovereign territory. We have a right to migrate to the places that we want to go for discovery, for safety, for whatever. And you have a right to return. Everyone has a right to return to their homeland. We've got to fight for these things, not as a separate issue of climate, but as tributaries that are coming together into a global river for justice. Our fight is not just about migrants crossing borders. Our fight is for a broader global justice, a new day, a new moment, a new world. Right now, because you got folks, and I just can't believe y'all take classes on purpose. Y'all doing, half of y'all, it's nighttime. You're putting extra work on yourself. You're learning, you got to read stuff and find out more things. You're doing work on purpose. You're the ones we need. You're the ones we need because there's a whole crew of folks avoiding even understanding the truth. There are a whole bunch of people who don't want to talk about it anymore. There are people who are going to avoid the very difficult discussions that we have to have if we're going to figure this out. But you are the brave ones. You are the brave ones. Taproot believes that we deserve to live, rest, and thrive in the places we love. To live, rest, and thrive in the places we love. And we believe that part of this work is rooted in love, it's rooted in place, and it's rooted in us having our best lives. That means for folks like me and people in the US and those of you in Western Europe, we're going to have to examine what the root cause of the crisis is and what the acceleration of the crisis is. I'm going to give you a hint. It has to do with Western consumption. It has to do with extraction to meet a Western appetite. It has to do with taking out rainforests in South America to have more cows graze so more Americans can have steak every day. It has to do with critical minerals coming out of the Congo and coming out of Central Africa, all around Africa, really, that's polluting water and fueling electric vehicles so we can all feel better about ourselves. There is something we've got to understand here, and it's rooted in our economy. There's a global economy that allows your money to go across all lines and stops people from crossing lines. There's an economy here rooted in the extraction of people, of minerals, of ecologies. It's really the most destructive thing that we've got going is this global economy. And so to talk about climate migration, to understand the justice piece of this, you're going to have to examine the state of your nation state, the state of your nation's economy, its role in this global economy, and what this economic system has to do with people being able to move across borders or not. This is not an easy topic, but this is the topic. Millions of people are slated to move across lines over the next several years because of climate and warming temperatures and global warming. This is happening. This is happening. You studying this right now is the right time. The solutions you come up with, give it a try. No one's got anything else to offer. Put it in there, put it on the table. And what we need right now is a lot of courage. This is going to take a lot of courage because in the middle of this, somebody, one of you, many of you are going to get hit by a climate disaster. Something's going to happen in the middle of this term. It's going to be too hot somewhere. It's going to be too cold somewhere. A flood is going to happen somewhere. It's coming. It's here. You have to stay with the work anyway. And that's what I have after 20 years of work since Katrina. Stay with it. It will be difficult, but you can survive. Being inconvenienced is not the same thing as being harmed. You are in a privileged position if what you can do right now is give yourself to more learning. This is our job and this is our role, and it is an honored and cherished one. I am so honored to be next to all of you as we take this to the next level. Thank you.